we started obviously with body care because that is the easiest segment, in terms of whether you make commodities like soaps or shower gels or stuff like that. I think from there we went on to skincare, which is the most difficult. So to have a consumer take a skincare product and put it in their face is the ultimate sense of credibility and trust. Not many people use Indian products on their faces on a prestige segment because everyone thinks that, the processes, the manufacturing, the things would be better from a company outside that's certified by, say, an EU regulation or a US regulation. But today, I can proudly say that, almost 65% of our sales comes from skincare. And this is serious skincare on a pricing range which could rival any international brand, but we still have value for money. So what you would pay 12 15,000 bucks for a, yes, women pay 12 15,000 rupees for a jar of cream. We sell that at 7 8,000, and they get the same results, they get the same trust and the same credibility doing that.
Welcome to Brick by Brick, Building Insurgent Brands by DSG Consumer Partners. Join us as we talk to the brightest founders, investors, and operators across the world about building enduring consumer brands. You can also check out the video of this episode on the DSGCP website and YouTube channel.
Hi, listeners. We have Sam Bedi, the Managing Director of Forest Essentials, one of the most iconic brands in India, with us in this edition of Brick by Brick. So, Sam, thank you for being here. We'll start with the origin story of the brand. Your mother started out more than 20 years back wanting to build a luxury Ayurveda brand. Luxury Ayurveda almost sounds like an oxymoron. So please, take us through the initial days, how the journey began, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Hari, for having me on the show. It's a pleasure being here. For the story, Hari, it's a very it's a mixed story because it's started from a garage. Like, as you know, a lot of entrepreneurial endeavors which have started from a basement or from a garage. That is one common twist in the story. But what is uncommon is it was started completely without a business plan. It was started without actually viewing it as a business. It was more of a project, and it was something that that she started because she felt, and as a lot of companies have started, or felt a need in the market to understand why there wasn't a high quality Indian beauty product, given everything that we have in the country, both traditionally in terms of ingredients, in terms of our history, heritage. So to understand why we as Indians were so enamored with using foreign products when we had so much at home. So I think that quest actually started as a hobby where she started to find out, how to extract oils, how to start making soaps, and I think that led on to something that her friends and family liked. Again, another story where you basically sample it out, and then there's great feedback, and that's what really led to For Essentials being created.
And how long did this passion project phase last, Sam? How many years did your mother, work on it as a passion project before you realized that there was a real business, in this?
Hari, it's funny. She still treats it as a passion project. I'm the one who has to make it a business project. So, everything is shot from the hip. Everything is gut instinct. Everything is still as she would have done it 20 years ago. I have come in primarily to try and focus that instinct, focus that need, and make sure that we actually run it as a business. But to answer your question, I think it really started getting a little more of understanding the potential was possibly in about 2004. We started the business in 2001. I joined in 2002. I was actually banking in New York in Standard Chartered Bank at the World Trade Center. And I came back in 2000 just before, buildings came down. And while I was looking for a job, I saw that she was doing this project. And while I actually had no interest in the project, I said, let me help you. I'll set up the admin, I'll put up the computers, the accounting, stuff like that. And then I started to find it interesting, and we both started working. And then I said, is it okay if I start working with you? Which was one of the best, but also one of the worst decisions I've ever taken. So, when you put two family members together, and when you start working, it's a difficult and a learning process because it's something completely new. But again, it was built again on passion. I started to understand why she was being so passionate about it, and I think we started in a very old fashioned way. So, gave it to stores who would take us on consignment. We gave it where, we could fit the product in. We took a hotel order without having any capacity. The classic story of an entrepreneurial
Mm.
kind of zeal to make sure we grow this business and make sure it happens. So with very little resources, I don't know if you've read in the past, it was literally started with 50,000 rupees. So we didn't have all the PE and VC money floating around today. But we started with that, and then I think the turning point came when we were offered a store in Khan Market in Delhi, which is our Fifth Avenue, so as to speak.
Mhm.
And at that time, it was
When
very.
was this?
This was in 2004, our very
Okay.
first store,
Okay.
which still exists, by the way. 20 years down the line, we still have that store.
Wow.
It was a turning point because I think the rent was much more than our turnover. So this was a situation where we said, listen, are we
Mm.
going to be able to afford this? Then I said, you know what, let's negotiate with the landlord. And the landlord was like, are you joking? Nobody negotiates in Khan Market. In fact, I've got 5 people waiting. It's a
Mhm.
personal favor that I'm actually even meeting you. So instead of us quizzing him, he quizzed us and asked us about finance. Luckily, we were vouched for by family,
Mm.
and we took the store. And I think again, store design on the fly, inventory on the fly, planogram on the fly. All the things that we all know today was completely alien to us. But the good part was, the first day we were going to open, and again, no store launch event, no social media, nothing. We just opened the shutters, and the number of people who came in and started asking questions and started selling. In fact, I think we ran out of products in 2 days. We had an empty shop for 2 days after that.
Wow.
But it was a turning point to understand the potential. And we also then, Hari, took two important decisions. One was very clearly to create our own distribution, because after working with a number of retailers, smaller retailers, working on consignment, we said there would one was that we would do our distribution, which we said is an old way and a very expensive way, because to build out stores in those days, and I'm talking 20 years ago, there weren't very many malls, there wasn't very many high streets to identify, because we didn't have the power of Google or social media. But we did know that this product was not a product just to be sold off the shelf. It was a lifestyle. It had to be explained. It had to be serviced. It had to be giving a kind of experience to the consumer. So that's where we took that call. And it was a very early call and an expensive call, but expensive because we didn't know it was expensive, because we had no idea that opening stores are going to be such an expensive proposition. The second was quality. We said that we will make sure, no matter how small we remain or how big we get, that quality is never going to be our compromise. So that was, I think, a very big, strong turning point for us.
Interesting. And when you launched, your price point was almost like over 5x that of mainstream brands. And how did what were like the key communication strategies that worked for you? It was a huge markup, right? It was a luxury brand at the end of the day.
So I think there were two, three factors in this. One is my mother has a very Steve Jobs approach. She said, you know what, build it correctly and someone's going to buy it. So she said the point is that you shouldn't be ashamed of what you're selling, because the product that we're trying to make is expensive. So in fact, in most cases, all the products, even today, it costs us more to actually make the product than the MRP of certain products that sell in our vertical. So when we started using pure sesame oil, pure mustard oil, stuff like that, with proper essential oils, the
Mhm.
cost was so high, right? And
Yes.
of course, we didn't work on GPs and margins and COGS and so on and so forth,
Mhm.
terms that all your listeners are probably familiar with. But we did understand, we said, listen, by the time we actually put the product to market, by the time we pay for our store, by the time we start, looking at how these overheads are going to work, you're right. Soaps were either selling at 10 rupees, or you had an imported soap from Yardley, or you had some very expensive soaps coming at, whatever. So we set a new price point. And
Mhm.
again, it might have been the lack of experience and knowledge that drove it forward, because, maybe knowing everything we know, maybe we would have done a lot more consumer studies and understood that. But it was a natural instinct, and as well as, driven by the fact that we were going to give quality.
But just double clicking on the price point you set, was it just like the typical you need a certain gross margin and you arrived at the price point, or was it as you said, there were imported products. So did you peg it at a certain markup or markdown to the?
We didn't peg it. We actually did it in terms of what we thought would be a margin to cover everything that we had. And it was my mother's very housewife thinking
Mhm.
that, we got to make sure that we are doing something that is going to sustain us for a while. It's not, a lot of trends that I see today, which I still don't understand about growing the market and then, making it profitable down the line.
Mhm.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And given you had a more analytical approach to business then and now, when you decided to join, it was her passion project, but would be great to understand how you thought about it, right, in terms of business potential, etc., at the time you joined the business.
I'll tell you, Hari, it was a decision where, now let me put it back. When I was doing the corporate banking in Stanchart, for me, I was okay with the business. It was in fact, I don't want to say boring because that would be rude, but I mean it was very run of the mill. It was coming into the office, working through the files, looking through the corporate accounts, dealing with. When I came back, I had a certain passion and a dream. My father came from an entrepreneurial family, was to have something that I could have called my own, something that I could do, where I could really put in that sweat and blood to actually make it move forward. So when she did this, first I was very skeptical. I said, candles, soaps. I mean, really, where is this going to go? And then the kind of work that came in, and like I said, I stepped in, I spent a few hours while looking for another job. And then finally, I just said, this is going to be a hell of a lot better than going and sitting on a 9 to 5 job and sitting at a desk. So I took it on, not knowing the potential fully, but took it on because I thought it was a better choice at that time.
Interesting. Sometimes the best decisions in life are the ones where you don't overthink it. So, uh,
Absolutely.
but now coming to the retail channel being the first one, you spoke about the store that you opened. How did you sort of decide on retail being the primary channel for the business? And today, I think you have more than 100 stores in the country, and can't think of many personal care brands that had their own stores back in the day, in the early 2000s. So were there any brands outside India that you got inspired by? The context here, Sam, is a lot of our founders are thinking about channels and thinking about disruptive channels in their categories, so it'll be useful to just lay out how you thought through that.
So in the beginning, Hari, there was no benchmarking, there was no competitors that we thought of. There was not even understanding what most of the international brands existed outside. Because again, like I told you, it was 2004.
Yeah.
Travel, even traveling to Bombay was a big deal at that point. So, between travel, between communication, between, there was no internet really, so as to speak, and uh, in terms of actually doing a situation where you thought that whether this is the right decision or not, even distribution. I mean, literally at that time, if you were to look at a shopper stop, everything was more masstige. Everything was actually, at that point, any department store that existed was either a big hyper grocery store or was kiranas or was. So for us, if you wanted a price, when a present soap is 10 rupees, to price it at 100 rupees, you needed to have a certain atmosphere, like I said, ambience around it. And that store, from that one store, we understood that this was the way forward. Now, like you said, there were not many brands who had stores, and especially not in the. I don't think anyone in the beauty segment had it, for that matter. At that point, no one
Yep.
really had their own store as such, right?
Mm.
Everybody was using distributors. Everybody wanted volumes. Everybody wanted to, it wasn't so much on the intangibles. Everything was just basically based on volume and size. So we kind of came in with a very different approach because we understood luxury. My mother understood luxury very well,
Mhm.
right? Not from just a fact of brand names, but understanding what luxury meant, what luxury could mean to a consumer
Mhm.
in terms of all the intangibles that I'm talking about. So from there, we started looking at it and we said that there is nobody who I would put my 100 rupee soap into presently. Yes, we had some boutiques, but like I told you, those boutiques were just personal endeavors that were being run and wasn't a very professional job. So it was difficult to even put the product, get
Mm.
the money out, all of that. So we said this is the better way to go.
Great. And and how did the store rollout eventually pan out? So the first store was back in '04, and today you have around 120 stores, if I'm not
We
mistaken.
have 175 stores. We're opening at the rate.
175.
We're opening about 20, 25 stores here.
Oh, okay. So you're currently at a 2025 store opening
till,
pace.
till, we, till we run out of space, because we got to keep in pace with the infrastructure in India.
Yeah, yeah. No, that I completely agree. But would be great to understand how it was in the initial years, right? Because these days you do, see a lot of brands opening stores, like opening hundreds of stores, in fact, in the first few years. And I'm always, wondering how it would end. So it'll be great to, share lessons in terms of, how people should think about the right pace of store rollouts in the initial year. When do you sort of optimize that before you get to even like a 25 store opening a year? That to me is quite a lot already. So,
Hari, I think you've put the I think you've actually put the right perspective on it, because we opened our first store in 2004, and I think we ventured into Bombay for our second store in maybe 2005 or 2006. In 2008 we had maybe four stores, right?
mm,
For the first 4 years. I want to talk about store rollouts, because I think it's very important, because in terms of whether it's for media consumption to say we're going to open 500 stores in the next 3 years, it doesn't work like that. Because I think the worst thing to do is to open a store and then shut it, because not only are you harming your own reputation but also livelihoods around you. It's not good planning. So I don't think speed is the name of the game, especially in a country like India. India is not one country. India, to even become a regional player, A, is hard, because you got to find the right infrastructure, you got to find, and then go from region to region, north to west or west to south, or then to the east, is not an easy game, because you are catering to very different cultures, crowds, and there's no certainty that if you make it well in one region that it's going to happen, pan India. So I think being very sure-footed, being patient. Today, of course, times have changed. There are cycles for PE money, VC money. Plus, you've got hundreds of brands coming in. Everybody's vying for the same space. So I get there is pressure, but I must tell you that I think slow and steady does still win the race. You have to make sure, A, that you're very, very sure about what you're opening, and B, you need to make sure it is profitable. Otherwise,
mm.
opening the stores for show is not a good idea.
And is there any thumb rule that you can share with founders in terms of like the first few years of their offline rollout? What should be the number of stores, number of cities they should be in, and refine the playbook before getting to the 20 plus stores a year sort of velocity?
So, Hari, I think obviously it depends on vertical to vertical, but I will give you my examples. For me,
Yeah.
I think what was very important was that you do things you can control. And when I say control, that is something that's right in front of you. So, if I was to actually do a store rollout and say my headquarters or my base is in Delhi, I would
Mhm.
saturate Delhi, I would saturate the regions near Delhi, right? And then make it a hub and spoke model and then move out. Because
Mhm.
if I was to move from Delhi to Bombay and keep five stores here and five stores in Bombay, for me, it would be difficult. But again, I'm talking about when I did it in my time.
Mhm.
Obviously, today, between communication, between logistics, it has become
Mhm.
easier. But I still think the hub and spoke model works well. So if you have more resources, then
Mhm.
start Delhi, Bombay, work around Bombay, Pune, all of that kind of region, work around Delhi, Chandigarh, all of that kind of region, and then start expanding. Keep
Mhm.
it as regional as possible, which is what I would suggest.
Mhm.
But again, like I said, it depends on business to business.
And in terms of the pace of rollout, Sam, was it like once a quarter and then you amped it up? Were there like, just trying to understand the step function, right? From opening one a year to 25 a year. What were like the step jumps you took?
See, 25 a year is almost opening a store every month. Your infrastructure has to be solid. Your confidence has to be solid. You need to make sure you know that what you're opening, at least 90% are going to bring money back to the table. Because I mean, opening 20, 25 stores a year and then even half of it not working is a
Mhm.
big deal, right? So I think in terms of rollout, it's your surety, it's your brand, it's what you're basically doing. So if I was to look at it as a brand new business today, right?
Mhm.
I wouldn't look at maybe more than four stores a year. I would maximum keep it to one a quarter. Even under pressure, I would keep it under one a quarter. I'd
Mhm.
see how they perform, and then maybe next year I'd add another two, or maybe double it at most. But that's the way I'd roll. I wouldn't go to 25 stores year one. It's a very hard proposition.
we have the same thought process. We typically suggest that it's better not to open more than one a quarter. Uh, but assuming someone's staying at that pace, what are like the early proof points founders should be looking out for, like store payback, rent to revenue, etc. First 12 to 18 months of a store opening. How do you think about the key metrics that one should be looking at?
I think given today what it costs to open a store, because you must remember that the rents, the revenue shares, the cost of construction, the deposits, in some cases there's CAM. There's a whole lot of things that end up. In certain situations they even make you pay for your POS and for your, in terms of your IT services if you're in a mall or if you're in an airport, which are expensive propositions. So I say, if you can, within 24 to 36 months, if you are looking at your break even,
Mhm.
depending on of course your costs. 18 to 24 is ideal. In some
Mhm.
situations, it might extend a little more, but anything more than that, then you got your P&L wrong.
Mhm.
As far as costs are concerned, I think the biggest cost, of course, is rent.
Mhm.
And if you start slipping over 20% of your P&L in rent, then you've got a problem in your hands. I know people are paying 30, 35%. Then you're making money for your landlord. You are not making money for the brand.
And is there any sort of thumb rule for payback that you have, the initial investment in a store, by when you should be able to recover it?
I would say because we built the brand today, I would not give it more than 24 months. We should be within 18 to 24 months. We should be okay.
Recover like capex that you
Everything,
put in a store,
everything,
right?
everything.
Got it. And you mentioned that the first store is older than 20 years now. The other challenge that we've seen retail businesses run into is, once you hit steady state after the 10-year mark, your costs are increasing at a certain pace, but your revenue isn't, and then you are just figuring out the next phase of growth. So how have you seen it in your older stores, right, past the 10-year mark? What are the levers you've been able to use to ensure that the growth continues at a store level?
Sorry, I think after the 10-year mark, unless there's an explosion in the market where new brands have come in or it's
Mhm.
reinvented itself, it's a steady pace of growth. And usually it's determined by inflation. So we price according to inflation. You
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
you'll have to look at inflation every year. You cannot avoid it. In some cases, I know that there is a price sensitivity. But
Mhm.
if you want to keep pace with rent, you want to keep pace with overheads, you want to keep pace with your salaries, you'll
Mhm.
have to look at inflation with maybe a couple of points here and there. So that's one part of growth that happens.
Mhm.
um, Everything else is determined by brand recall, marketing, new launches, bringing the consumer to buy more, cross-selling it. So the usual tricks of the trade. But having said that, a certain service, like I have car market consumers who have come in from 2004 and who are still coming in 2024,
Mhm.
and they even know where my product on the shelf is. They know the staff very well. So that is there. You have to keep them. Actually, it's a second home in a sort of a way.
And do you also track the number of times a customer purchases from a store in a year? Are those metrics that are important that you track?
Typically in our industry, Hari, you look at maybe 4 to 6 times a year.
Okay.
So usually the products last maybe 2 months at a
Mhm.
go.
Mhm.
But because we have a lot of gifting, we have a lot of things. So typically we see more 6 to 8 visits a year.
Mhm.
It's not only for personal consumption, but in terms of gifting or for giving out or stuff like that. So we have we have people who come in just for consultations and a cup of tea. So I won't even count those. But I'm talking about in
The
actual
tea is
buying
good.
habit between
Yeah.
6 and 8 times a year.
Interesting. And now we have the benefit of online digital platforms, etc. But in your initial largely offline world, how were you able to like collect customer feedback and incorporate it in product development, etc.? Would be great to understand that.
It was a tough one because most of the customers in the prestige segment are always wary about giving out their numbers or emails because it's just a little more privacy for them.
Mhm.
We used to have the old fashioned. I remember going abroad and buying those books where you fill in the phone number and the email and the address. Those visitors books.
Yeah.
I used to buy them by the dozens and put them in each of the stores. But then it was an oxymoron because we tell the staff, don't pester anyone.
Mm.
Don't say, if you'd like to, please leave it. So data collection at that point was very, very difficult. It took
Mm.
a long time to put together. But like I said, a lot of the customers, and even today and from those days, they have such a comfort. My staff attrition is very low. So we've had people for many, many years. So whenever something new comes to the store or when they know that they're running our product, it's just literally a phone call. So these are all community stores.
Mhm.
We literally build our stores because, see, ultimately after a certain size, right, you serve certain pin codes, you serve certain geographies, but then you want to make your store strong in that very community. So it becomes a kind of a person it's almost like a commodity, if nothing
Mm.
else, right? Ma'am, your shower gel must have run out by now. Would you like to
Mm.
drink? I've got a brand new exciting flavor. So stuff like that. But you're right, data analysis, data collection at that point was nowhere near what it's today. Absolutely not.
And it's interesting that you're saying that the attrition is low, because that's like, again, a big challenge for all the retail businesses. Anything you've done differently that's helped you retain people longer?
I think number one, I think we are the bullseye for anyone because we have a very good service level. We have great staff, in terms of what we've got. I think the two, three things are: one is a very strong loyalty to the company.
Mm.
We really incorporate them, treat them as family. I think it's very important that they feel part of what you're doing. We, in fact, a lot of them understand, it's not what we sell is what we actually do. So it's not that we make it in some sweatshop and then say, it's made in the Himalayas with the community and fermented in a certain way. They actually see what we do, right? They use the product, they know the product. Training is still done by, my mother, Mrs. Kulkarni,
Mhm.
even today, which is a very strong aspect for us. And of course, there is the money aspect. They're paid well, they incentivize well. So nobody's going to move for a few bucks. If it moves, if they do move, it's going to be for a lot higher. But then I can assure you, those pay scales are not, really attainable for anyone in the FMCG trade. So
Right.
there is a trade-off for us.
No, and training plays a big role. So, and then if your mother continues to do it, I can see
E-
the
Even
effect.
today, even
Yeah.
today, it is our number one priority in terms of service.
No, that's amazing. Now, looking at your current store footprint of the 175 stores, how many of them are outside the top six cities
I would say we have about six,
or
maybe
top four, whatever is top of
half.
mind for
Maybe
you?
half. So I'll take six metros. Maybe
Hmm.
half.
Wow. Okay. Now that gives a clear sense of the purchasing power that's available beyond metros in this
Hari,
country.
you will be shocked. I mean, you won't be shocked. You are very good at your business, so you know this. But I'm just saying, in terms of see, I think there's let me put a little bit of clarity there. Consumption power in this country has never been an issue. It's not a fallacy. It doesn't mean that someone in Moradabad or someone in Vishakhapatnam or doesn't have the money. They do.
Hmm.
It's just the spending patterns, the exposure, and of course, understanding what evolution they are in life. Because if you really look at it, when people make money, what is the first thing you do? You put a roof over your head,
Hmm.
then you want to impress the neighbor with a car, then you buy the watch, then you save money for the jewelry and the wedding, right? And then once you got past all of those stages, you start looking at self-consumption. So whether it's in terms of food, whether it's in terms of health, whether it's in terms of pampering yourself, stuff that maybe someone else can't see but makes you feel good, right? These towns are now going through this evolution. So when I opened, I've got two stores in Dehradun. I studied in Dehradun for what 7 years, and I never dreamt that I would even have a store today in Dehradun. I have two stores in Dehradun, and they're doing very well. So the money is there, the exposure is now coming in, and the consumption patterns are changing. That's very, very important, right? If I had opened in Dehradun 10 years ago, nobody would have paid 400 bucks or 300 bucks for a soap, right? There's no way in hell. Today, they understand quality. Like I said, Google's there, travel, everybody's traveled abroad, everyone's got exposure. So the market has evolved. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it is amazing, and as you said, it's like that steady climb up the Maslow's hierarchy, and I think it's the
Exactly.
self-actualized people that are your primary audience. And how do you think about which towns to go after? Right after this conversation, I am going to be speaking to a lot of our founders on following Forest Essentials, beyond top six. But for you, given you're sort of pushing the envelope, how do you think about which town is ready, where to expand into next, etc.?
Hari, I think there's a lot of now we do data, we do analysis, we
Hmm.
understand. We also use our online, sales as a barometer in terms of understanding where the patterns are coming from, where is
Mhm.
that thing. We're looking at population sizes. We're looking at where the new mall infrastructures are coming up.
Mhm.
So we take a very, very macro view of it.
Mhm.
Then I send in a couple of teams to study. I want to go see what brands are there. I want to go see what they're buying. How much are these stores doing? So we do a lot of market intel as well. If there's say for an argument's sake a West Side or a Marks and Spencers or a
Right.
Starbucks or a fellow brand, going
Mhm.
there, what are they doing? And we know now over the years what our patterns are, what we would compare
Mhm.
to sales in terms of these other brands, and then we take a call. Then we do a little bit of a P&L study. What's the rent looking like?
Mhm.
How would that work? What is the footfall? What is the demographics around that? So it's a lot more scientific now because, like I said, it's very easy to open the first 100 stores because you know exactly where to go, right? You can say, oh, I got Delhi, Bangalore, Chennai, and then for the next 100 stores, and then this 100 stores that are going to come even after that, the decisions have to be right because these are long-term decisions. Landlords now are not letting you just walk in and walk out.
Mhm.
Whether it's through your deposit, whether it's the lock-in period, whether it's your furniture going in, you cannot take light decisions after your first couple of 100 stores.
No, that's true. And how does are there any nuances in terms of store performance, top six and beyond, or is it similar?
It was always Delhi for us for a long time, and then I noticed that as the brand grew and the trust factor grew, the West started overtaking the North, and the West is a very different demographic, right? They are very exposed, very sharp, very well traveled, and it takes a long time to get that trust. But when you get that trust, then they're good loyalists to have. So I think the West was that.
Mhm.
South took us a while, but if I tell you stories about how retail has gone, even in the South, it's amazing. And it's so many idiosyncrasies and so many cities that you work with. In Lucknow, we have a lot of consumers, but the consumers send their drivers, they send their maids, they send their guys to pick up the stuff. We
Mhm.
know because from the loyalty programs, we can understand
Mhm.
the patterns and all that. In the South, we have a lot of Tollywood, we have a lot of politicians. So it's very interesting patterns that emerge, but
Mhm.
very strong. So I mean, in our loyalty, I think maybe we have almost a 70-72% loyalty sales, which is very, very strong.
Wow. Okay. Okay. And do you have a preference between high street and malls, or are you neutral?
It's an evolution. This is a complete evolution because when we started there was, like I said, high streets. You picked up the iconic high streets, whether you called it Breach Candy in Bombay or whether you'd like to call it Khan Market in Delhi, right?
You
So
didn't
there
have
was,
many malls.
sorry.
You didn't have many malls also at that time.
You don't have many malls, exactly, right? And then malls really took off. So
Mhm.
when the Saket came into play, when all of these promenades, when Emporio, when all these came into play, then
Mhm.
obviously we said, malls make sense. Our high street's going to die. And in terms of malls, again, negotiating, trying to get to the ground floor, it's become a very tough business now because it's the
Mm.
landlord's world today. There's
Yeah.
been cycles, right? There's cycles when the brands rule, there's cycles when the landlords rule. So unfortunately, today the landlords are ruling. But I think in terms of we went very strongly into the malls, and then we hit a point where we came back to the high streets. And I think that high street situation happened just before COVID. We started to understand that not everyone is going to a mall because first it made sense, right? You go to the mall, you shop, you eat, you watch a movie, everything, parking, all taken care of. But not everyone is going to go and get stuck by thousands of people around you, right? So maybe they want a little more privacy. They prefer their high street, like I said, community store, a different shopping experience. So after COVID, we went right back to high street. We picked up a lot of high streets. Plus, as you go into smaller towns, even despite having a mall, a lot of people do still love their high street. So we've taken combinations of high street and malls in certain situations.
Got it. And now, switching gears, you not only own your own channel, your stores, but you also have your own manufacturing. And could you just talk us through the decision to go with your own manufacturing? And a lot of our founders operate their own manufacturing setups. As a fund, we are big fans of founders that run facilities. However, the counter argument always is it comes in the way of scaling, etc. And do you want to take on the headache? So would be great to understand the decision to initially start off and then why you're sticking to it, right, even today.
Sorry, I think there are two, three things. One is also depends on what stage you're in your life, I mean, your business, right? If you really look at it, to invest into a manufacturing facility at the very start might be an expensive proposition because today it's not as easy as just putting up a plant, throwing a machine in there, and you start working. There's a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of regulations. And if you want to make a quality product, the kind of investment you have to make today is enormous.
Hmm.
I mean, even to keep it up to GMP standards, to pass your your ISI, to do all of that stuff, it's an expensive process.
Mhm.
So a lot of people don't want, and also running it is a big headache. So I'm not even just talking about the
Yeah.
investment side of things, but making sure you have the right team, to making sure that you keep your QC, your R&D, your microbiology, your operations is not an easy process. When we started, we had to outsource at the beginning, but we realized over time that, and I told you, when we took that, those fateful decisions of opening our own stores and keeping our own quality, we realized that until you control every aspect of this chain, you will not get what you want. You have to have your own formula. See, today, a lot of our business rivals, or a lot of people in the vertical, they pick up mundane formulations and just make a scent difference, right? So saying, "Oh, I've brought out a new soap, but it's orange and lavender," right? But that's not really bringing skin into the game, because what is making your soap or your oil or your shampoo or your product any different from anywhere else, right? Now, there are some people who have done a good job of it, so I don't want to put it down as a generalization, because
Mhm.
I have seen some brands who've come up with good quality products. But for most, it's picking up what's available because they don't invest the time or knowledge into R&D. They don't have the teams. They don't. So a lot of it depends on what kind of person you are also, right? Are you a scientist coming to bring a product in, or are you a marketing person who's coming to bring a product in? Who
Mhm.
are you, and what other roles do you have to fulfill in order to make it a complete rounded product? So I think it's a difficult question for me to answer, but I think if the brand takes off, and yes, if you can control everything from start to finish, and you have the ability to do it, I think it's important, because quality has to be done very, very carefully.
Right. And just staying on advice for founders, the other trend that we've seen in beauty and personal care is it almost mimics fast fashion now in terms of just product life cycles. What sold last year, you have to launch new products, and it's almost like you're on a treadmill. So how would what would your sort of advice be for founders starting out in beauty and personal care, right? With this, whole.
With the onset of online, and like you said, data, and we talked about trends, we talked about consumers' preferences changing so quickly.
Mhm.
I do want to say that you can't make a product in 2 months and sell it just because it's the fad of the season. It's not something, it's run of the mill. Like, I've seen stuff like onion oils,
Mhm.
moringa oils, stuff come out, become a fad, and die just as quickly, right? At the end of the day, a product, if you are a serious player, and especially if you're in skincare, you need to really put in that kind of time, effort, ingredients, research, and really go through the clinical trials of putting a product out there.
Mhm.
There will be trends. Sure, there will be players who capitalize on trends. But if you are a serious person, and in terms of a serious business and long term, again, what is the intention for your business? Because when you start a business,
Mhm.
you have to be very aligned with the fact of what you're planning to do. Are you planning to quickly make money and sell it out? Not that anything is wrong. Every single thing is fine. It's just about what you want. Or are you there to build a legacy? Are you there to build a business to make products for skincare? Are you going to go by fads? Are you going to be trendy? All of that determines your decision. But I do want to say that I think your product is what will speak at the end of the day. So if you get that wrong, it doesn't matter how nicely you package it, no matter what price point you sell it, right? So Hari, to answer your question, to throw out marketing money and get a ROAS of 1 does not make sense. That is basically, you're just trying to build volume, but there's no loyalty, and there's obviously no love of the product.
And today, given the stage and scale Forest Essentials is at, how many new products do you launch every year? And and again, what is the typical product life cycle, right, of your hero products?
Our hero products have remained hero products all throughout. There is ultimately, it's like, when we talk about even the bigger brands like Estee Lauder, who are my partners, Advanced Night Repair has been there for 50 years, right? It's a classic product. So I think for us, In terms of launches, when we do a brand new launch in a brand new like in a category of something that we don't have, I
Mhm.
think that would be limited to about 2 a year, because it takes us almost 18 to 24 months to actually formulate, get it right, and put that together. In
Mhm.
terms of brand extensions, we can do that maybe 4 times a year. It's a
Mhm.
new sense, maybe brand extensions, stuff like that. That happens. So an overall of about six, but classified by maybe one or two very very important launches. In fact, we have one coming up in November. So we do that twice a year in and for the product. We also see cycles, right? So some product as a category,
Mhm.
start diminishing along the way. So for example, as lifestyles have changed, evolved, time has become
Mhm.
less, stress has increased, stuff like having a bath with a lovely bar of soap for a long time, or a bath and shower oil, or a body scrub where you could sit and get a massage for 2 hours,
Mhm.
those are starting to be replaced by shower gels. By thing, there is of course still a market for it, because at the end of the day, the same person who's stressed and wants to do everything on time also need 2 hours of that bath time, and also needs 2 hours of that candle, and also needs, so it's a cycle, but I'm seeing a lot of evolution along the way.
Interesting. And would be great to also walk the listeners through how your product portfolio has evolved since launch. I think when you started, it was largely the soaps and oils, right? Um, Again, context here is, there's a lot of founders always have the pressure, temptation to launch new categories, typically, way sooner than we would typically like. So I think to start off and set context, it'll help to capture your journey, and then we can talk about how to think through when to launch new categories, etc.
For me, being conservative always works better. I think, rather than launching a slew of stuff or trying to do too much at one go, I think starting small, focusing, making it work, seeing what doesn't work, and then adding, or then moving the range around makes sense. We started obviously with body care because that is the easiest segment, in terms of whether you make commodities like soaps or shower gels or stuff like that. I think from there we went on to skincare, which is the most difficult. So to have a consumer take a skincare product and put it in their face is the ultimate sense of credibility and trust. Not many people use Indian products on their faces on a prestige segment, because everyone thinks that the processes, the manufacturing, the things would be better from a company outside that's certified by, say, an EU regulation or a US regulation. But today, I can proudly say that almost 65% of our sales comes from skincare, and this is serious skincare on a pricing range which could rival any international brand. But we still have value for money. So what you would pay 12 15,000 bucks for a, yes, women pay 12 15,000 rupees for a jar of cream.
Mhm.
We sell that at 7 8,000, and they get the same results, they get the same trust and the same credibility doing that. We also have a hair care segment, which I think is a very strong growing segment. Again, with the new Gen Z and with the millennials, I think hair is becoming very, very important. And not just about shampooing your hair, but
Mhm.
whether we talk about all the additional stuff that we do with masks, with thickeners, with all of the stuff, the stress is causing lots of hair problems going forward. But I mean, I think hair care is a very strong category, and that's where we stand. Body care is always interesting, but it's highly commoditized now because everyone's got all kinds of oils and essential oils and soaps and all that stuff. But still, you can still differentiate by quality. You can still differentiate by fragrance. So there is still a little bit of differentiation there.
Now, coming to the second question that I had, which is in terms of, what are the mental models, frameworks founders can use on when they should expand to another category? Like, you went from body care to face care and then hair care. How would you encourage them to think through it? Because if you do too many things too soon, you don't stand for anything. You run the risk of diluting the brand.
Hari, I think that's a very important point, because I think what you said is right. I think first, build credibility and build trust in what you've actually set to launch out. So, for example, if you've launched with, say, 2 products or 4 products or 5 products, build that credibility. You are not going to increase your sale by making those 5 products 10 products and suddenly thinking that now my sale is going to double, until
Mhm.
you've actually built a credibility factor with your consumers. They know what you stand for, and then you build extensions and slowly build those extensions, because you also don't want to dilute and say, today I'm known for my shampoo, but tomorrow I'm suddenly doing a soap, or I'm going to do an oil, right? You can, there's no doubt that you can get into those universes, but you have to be patient. You have to make sure that you've got that entire trust factor, credibility, and the time right, and then start launching. And like I've said, better to be conservative, because you launch 100 things and you shut down 50 things, your brand is finished forever.
Hmm. Fair. The last part of the conversation, Sam, I want to focus on how you thought about the business growth and both historical and the projections, your ambitions from here. So, would be useful to know how long did it take for, given you operate at the very premium end of the pricing spectrum, how long did it take for the business to get to the 10 crore mark, 100 crore mark? And also, if you can give a sense of the capital that was needed to get there, that'll be very useful.
So I think we hit the 10 crore mark in about 2009. So maybe about 8 years after we started,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because things were starting to open up. Uh, the capital needs was 50,000 rupees, which we put in till 2009. Like I said, we were very conservative. Even today, we have no debt. We don't even have a term working loan. My bank is after my life. You guys need to take a loan, but we don't have one. We don't have a term loan. We don't have working limits. We don't have anything of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
I think we reached the 100 crore mark in about 2015, if I'm not wrong, somewhere
Okay.
around that region. And that was when Esplora had invested into us in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
But that money we used for building our own production facilities and so on and so forth.
Right.
Like I said, for me, and I hate to repeat the Raj, but it's cash is king. I mean, you have to make sure your cash flow, everything runs perfectly, and that's my other advice to give you. Be very careful on how you deploy the capital, and be very very careful on how you're going to use it, because there is no quick fix. There is no speedy way of doing things. But if you build the base correctly, and you reach a certain stage, and you have that foundation, then exponentially will automatically grow. So that's something that happened to us as well.
Right.
We just didn't start building 25 stores in the first thing, but now it's automatic for us,
Yeah.
right? Like I said, the data, the analysis, all the infrastructure is in place, so we can open. And if I want to move from 25 stores that the country allows me, I'll move to 40 stores a year. But
Mhm.
I'll do so with confidence, and I'll have that foundation in place.
No, absolutely. Fully aligned on that. And I also read somewhere that you did not spend anything on advertising at all in the first 10 years.
I don't think we spent anything in the first 15 years, really speaking. But I mean, and we made our first TV advert in, I think, 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And that was after Star TV chased me and chased me. And I said, listen, guys, we don't even have the money to, buy your TV. I don't know what you're talking about putting, an ad on the TV. But then that's when HD TV came in, and, they had the SD TVs, and they basically started really focusing on smaller audiences and more niche audiences. So we took the call. And I think that's where we started really to look at making the brand pan India. Because, it's also where the consumer turns around and says, if they've got the money to put up a beautiful ad on TV, then they must be doing well, right? That brand must be having something behind it. And then we started to really, but yes, the first 10 years was all word of mouth. Our beauty advisors and our consumers were ambassadors.
And as you think about, brand marketing, since you started investing in brand, how do you, think about budget allocations to brand marketing and the key messages, that you want to deliver through your brand campaigns?
So, Hari, I think again, it's a stage, it's a life cycle.
Mhm.
Like you obviously have to have a slightly larger percentage of your sales going into marketing as you start, which is a natural way to start, right? In
Mhm.
some cases, 40% if it requires it. But I think what's important is that today, advertising, whether you'd like to call it social media, whether you'd like to call it online, whether you'd like to call it offline, has become an extremely expensive process,
Mhm.
right? So, it's really a lot of thought has to go in on how you're going to build your brand, because it can be a never ending black hole. I mean, offline, you can't even measure any ROI, to tell you the truth. Online, when you measure ROI and you think about all the money that Meta and Google are making, there's really no money left in the till, because it's become so expensive, right? To even boost, to even look at what advertising you put in terms of looking how you're going to reach people. But having said all of that, if you deploy your money very very smartly, very correctly, and again build it on the product. That is, again, I'm coming back to it. It has to be product. So you'll have to be very innovative how you do it. In a more mature cycle, I still think anything less than 15 to 20% is still less because you're still growing. I would put, for us, even now, I would put 15, 18% as a bare minimum, and I'd put some exception of another 2% there if I need to. But I think anything under that, you will not continue to grow the brand. You have to invest money back in. There's no doubt about that.
And what is the share of online in the business today, Sam?
I think we're trending at about, Hari, at about 23, 24%.
Okay.
Um, I must tell you, it's been a life cycle. Just so you know, I know we're getting to the end of this, but I just want to tell you that as I saw the online grow and as everybody went with the potential, we had, in fact, in the last 4 years, we had must have had 300-400 brands in my vertical who launched online.
Mm.
And the fact that they're coming offline tells you a story. Because really, truly, I think while we tout these figures of, 500 million people online, your total addressable market, even on a luxury level today, is 5 million, right? And if you really look at it and you're going into a master's level, maybe 3-4 times that. But at the end of the day, everyone's chasing the same consumer. And chasing that same consumer is becoming more expensive, it's bombarding them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not as rosy as everyone thinks that this online is just suddenly going to take off. It's going to take time. Also, the market has been built by the Amazons, the Flipkarts, the Nikas. It's on a very strong discounting model. So today, the consumer is looking for the best deal online. The consumer is still flipping from website to website, brand to brand. And so there's no strong loyalty online. So you have to be very careful of not diluting yourself or going down that path where you suddenly think you're going to make a quick buck, but then you are going to be tampering with the brand legacy.
Mm.
It is still, India is still very driven by offline. I think that's still a very important segment, and I think it will be for the time to come.
And it'll be useful to define the prestige segment the way you define it. Is it based on price point or income level? How do you know?
Prestige for us is a bridge to luxury. So, when we talk about bridge to luxury, how do I put demographics? I think upper middle class. But you know what? In my beauty segment, Hari, I'll tell you, there are many people who save up. It's almost like that story of someone who might be on a 50,000 rupee job is saving up to buy an LV bag, right?
No, that's why I asked you whether you define it more on price points or income groups. I think it's more on price points, right?
We do more price points because income groups spend, and in the loyalty in this segment is so strong that if someone feels, they will actually give up something else to buy a jar of cream that suits them, even if it's beyond their budget, right? To buy it. So yes, I think for me, demographics is very mixed, but I think in terms of price points, so you lie over, so there's masstige, then there's prestige, and then there's luxury, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's defined by, say, I mean, I'm just taking random numbers. So 30% below luxury, 30% above masstige. You can define it by price points.
Right. And from the scale that you are at, for the business, how do you think about the growth targets? You've been very sort of conservative, patient in the way you built it, and you are in that compounding zone. But what sort of growth ambitions do you have? I don't know what your planning horizon is, but
my planning is dependent on a lot of factors. So obviously, the government is now spending a lot on infrastructure, which is very encouraging. All the mall developers are upping their game. There's a lot more coming in terms of, like I said, airports. Everything determines it because, all these towns are going to grow. All these satellite towns are going to grow through roads. They're going to go through airports. They're going to go through metro stations. So as and when those go, like if you'd asked me even 10 years ago, I would have said, listen, I can't name you more than 30 cities. You asked me 5 years ago, I would have said 60 cities. Today, I'll tell you 100 cities. Tomorrow, in the next 3 years, I'm hoping that the cities will double. So I will grow in pace with this. And I'm hoping by, say, for an argument's sake, in 3 years, I'd like to double the store count. If not, at least get to the 300 mark. So, because I think over the next 5 years, having anything less than 500 stores would have been a waste of my effort for all these 20 years.
Right. And, in your journey till date, did you ever have the temptation to launch a brand in the lower price segment, or given just the delta in market size between the segment you operate and the couple that are below, would be great to understand your thought process why you decided against it?
Hari, many times. So we do have a second brand, but we use that for the institutional segment, which looks after a slightly lower than the 5-star plus. So that because those are still very good segments to serve. And I often thought of taking that and moving it down to a retail line. I even had the branding ready. I had the USP ready. I pretty much even had a product line ready.
Mhm.
But staying on top of my game, keeping my head down, and with the onslaught of so much competition coming in, which I think competition actually is good because we're still serving a very small market. It's
Yeah.
still very small, addressable. So I think more competition comes in, it just opens up the game.
Mhm.
But I still have to stay ahead of the competition because remember, another thing is you've got a big target paid to your back. So like whether I talked about whether it was staffing, whether I talked about
Mhm.
product line, whether I talked about our campaigns, a lot of it then gets picked up along the way. So it's taken up 24 hours of my day, 7 days a week of keeping
Mhm.
this, in front in the race. But I will tell you, Hari, that this is something that I will take to fruition. So whether I do it in house or I buy someone and then grow the market on a mastery level, I think what you're saying is making a lot of sense, and I do believe that will happen.
Yeah, I was, it was more a question to understand, your thought process. We are
But it
brands.
makes sense to do it.
Fair enough. And and what's like the long-term vision? I know this the partnership with Estee Lauder, but what is the long-term vision for the brand?
Hari, we have one long-term vision. We've had this long-term vision since the incorporation that we want to represent India. We want India to be a global brand. We want to be part of that journey. We started about Make in India. We started about proudly representing India a long time before it became, a campaign here in India. So that's one thing we're very clear. We want to build a global brand that could rival anything outside. I'm just taking examples of a L'Occitane or a Body Shop or whatever. Why can't we have
Yeah.
stores in the best malls, in the best high streets, in the best cities in the world with what we've got to offer? And we are working on that. We've opened in London, we've opened in the GCC, and we're on our way. So we will build this brand out.
And you are best positioned for that. We've come to the end of it, Sam. So I'll finish with our typical closing question. So for founders listening in who want to build the next Forest Essentials, what are the personality traits that they can borrow from Sam for them to pull it off?
Three words. I think one is patience. Please be patient because you cannot get something overnight unless you're some tech mogul or wizard. I mean, I think you need to be very patient about what your long term game is. I think focus, because like Hari and I have talked about in this podcast, I think it's very important that what product, what you're going to do, what your company is standing for. And I think the third one is good old fashioned hard work. You just can't substitute it. That is something that's going to continue happening. So I think if you can manage these three, I think you're on the road to it.
No, that's wonderful, Sam. And those are probably, especially the first two, patience and focus, are our mantra day in and day out. So we should have a longer conversation on that. But it was an amazing, amazing episode, and just the magic of laying the foundation right and the compounding happening later with just sheer patience and focus. I think it's a lesson for everyone. Really appreciate you taking out the time. Thank you so much, Sam.
Not at all, Hari. Thank you very much.